John had worked for the same manufacturing company for 34 years. He wasn't rich. He wasn't lucky. He was simply consistent. Every payday, he put a little money into his retirement account. Whenever he got a raise, he increased his contributions. While some of his friends bought new cars or took expensive vacations, John kept saving. He always believed one thing. One day it'll all be worth it. Then one Friday afternoon, that day finally arrived. John logged into his retirement account. For a few seconds, he simply stared at the screen. His balance had reached $500,000. John smiled. 34 years of hard work. 34 years of sacrifice. 34 years of believing in the future. He finally felt like retirement was within reach. That evening, he shared the news with his wife. She smiled and said, "We're getting close." For the first time in years, retirement didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a plan. Later that night, John was relaxing in his favorite chair, scrolling through the news on his phone. One headline caught his attention. Experts say you'll need at least $1 million to retire comfortably. John stopped scrolling. He read the headline again. Then he looked back at his retirement account. $500,000. Just a few hours earlier, that number had made him feel proud. Now it made him feel unprepared. Nothing about his retirement account had changed. Not $1. But somehow everything felt different. John couldn't stop asking himself one question. Had I spent 34 years saving, only to discover I wasn't even halfway there? If that headline was true, he might have to work another 5, maybe even 10 years. But if it wasn't, how many people were delaying retirement because they believed a number that was never meant for them? John didn't know the answer, but he was determined to find it. The next morning, John woke up at the same time he always did. He made his coffee, grabbed his lunch, and drove to work. Everything around him looked the same, but his mind wasn't. The headline kept replaying over and over. You'll need at least $1 million to retire comfortably. By lunchtime, John had already checked his retirement account twice. The balance was still $500,000. Yesterday, that number had made him feel confident. Today, it made him feel behind. That evening, his wife noticed he had barely touched his dinner. "You've been quiet ever since yesterday." John sighed. "I thought we were almost ready to retire. Now I'm not so sure." She looked at him for a moment. What changed? John picked up his phone and showed her the headline. She read it carefully, then handed the phone back. "John, who decided that $1 million is your number?" John didn't answer, because he didn't know. It was just a number he had heard over the years. From TV. From articles. From people talking about retirement. He had accepted it as fact, without ever asking where it came from. That's a mistake many people make. The media often talks about average retirement savings. But retirement isn't built around averages. It's built around your lifestyle, your monthly expenses, and your personal goals. The same retirement number can mean complete financial freedom for one person, and not be enough for someone else. John had spent 34 years focused on how much he had saved. He had never stopped to ask, how much do I actually need? That simple question changed everything. The next morning, John decided to stop searching for opinions. Instead, he scheduled a meeting with a retirement advisor. He wanted answers based on his life, not someone else's headline. A few days later, John walked into the office of a retirement advisor named Sarah. He expected the first question to be simple. How much have you saved? Instead, Sarah smiled and asked, So, John, what brings you in today? John took a deep breath. I've spent 34 years saving for retirement. My account just reached $500,000. I thought I was ready. Then I read that I needed at least $1 million. I just want to know. Am I really that far behind? Sarah nodded. I hear that question almost every day. She opened a notebook. But before we talk about your savings, I want to ask you something. John leaned forward. Sarah smiled. How much does your life cost every month? John looked confused. I'm not sure. Sarah nodded. That's okay. Most people aren't. They know exactly how much they've saved. But very few know how much they actually spend. That's where retirement planning really begins. Not with your savings, but with your expenses. Because your retirement savings aren't meant to replace a number in your bank account. They're meant to help pay for the life you want to live. Sarah handed John a blank sheet of paper. Let's write down your monthly expenses. Housing, utilities, groceries, insurance, transportation, healthcare, entertainment, everything. For the next 20 minutes, John listed every expense he could think of. When they finished, Sarah added up the numbers. She turned the paper toward John. This, she said, is the most important number in your retirement plan. John looked surprised. I thought my retirement account was the most important number. Sarah smiled. Most people think that. But your retirement account only answers one question. How much have you saved? This number answers a much more important question. How much does your retirement actually cost? For the first time, John realized he'd been chasing a savings goal, without knowing the goal it was supposed to support. Sarah picked up the paper with John's monthly expenses. Then she placed it beside his retirement statement. John, these two numbers are connected. But most people spend their lives looking at only one of them. John nodded. I've always focused on how much I've saved. And that's completely normal, Sarah said. But retirement isn't about reaching a certain amount of money. It's about creating enough income to cover your expenses. John looked down at the paper again. So how do I know if my savings are enough? Sarah picked up a pen and wrote one number. 4%. John looked at it. What does that mean? Sarah smiled. It's called the 4% Guideline. It's one of the most widely discussed starting points in retirement planning. The basic idea is simple. If someone has a retirement portfolio, they may be able to withdraw around 4% in the first year of retirement, then adjust over time. She wrote another example. $500,000 times 4% equals $20,000. John looked at the number. So I could only live on $20,000 a year? Sarah shook her head. That's the part many people misunderstand. Your retirement savings usually aren't your only source of income. Many people assume their retirement account has to replace their entire paycheck. But for most retirees, that's not how retirement works. Retirement income often comes from several different sources. Your retirement savings may be one piece. Social Security may be another. Some people also have a pension. Others have personal savings, investments, or even part-time income. The goal isn't to make one account do all the work. The goal is to make all of your income sources work together. Sarah drew 4 simple circles on the paper. One circle was labeled retirement savings. Another was Social Security. The third was personal savings. And the fourth was other income. Think of retirement like a table, she said. If one leg has to hold all the weight, the table becomes unstable. But when the weight is shared, the table becomes much stronger. John looked at the page. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about $1 million. He was thinking about how all the pieces fit together. And that completely changed the question he had been asking. Instead of asking, do I have enough money? He found himself asking, how much of my retirement is already covered? The piece John had been missing. Sarah picked up another sheet of paper. Now let's look at something else. She turned her computer screen toward John. Have you ever checked your Social Security estimate? John shook his head. No. I've always focused on my retirement account. Sarah smiled. You're not alone. A lot of people do. She logged into the Social Security estimator. A few moments later, John's estimated monthly benefit appeared on the screen. He stared at it. I didn't realize it would be that much. Sarah nodded. Most people don't. They spend years tracking how much they've saved. But they rarely think about the income they've already earned. Social Security was never designed to replace your entire paycheck. For most retirees, it's meant to provide a foundation. Your retirement savings are there to help fill the gap, not carry the entire burden. Sarah wrote 2 numbers on the paper. Monthly expenses. Monthly Social Security. Then she looked at John. If Social Security covers part of your monthly expenses, how much does your retirement savings actually need to provide? John picked up the calculator. He subtracted one number from the other. Then he stopped. He looked back at Sarah. So, my retirement account doesn't have to replace my entire income? Sarah smiled. Exactly. It only needs to help cover the difference. John leaned back in his chair. For the first time since reading that headline, the numbers were starting to make sense. He had been looking at his retirement account as if it had to do everything on its own. But that was never the plan. Most retirees receive income from more than one source. Social Security, retirement savings, personal savings, sometimes a pension, sometimes part-time work. Every retirement looks different. That's why one retirement number can never fit everyone. Sarah closed the folder. John, I think you're finally asking the right question. John smiled. I think so too. Instead of asking, do I have $1 million? He was finally asking, will my retirement income cover the life my wife and I want to live? And those are 2 very different questions. John drove home in silence. For the first time in days, he wasn't thinking about the headline. He was thinking about everything Sarah had shown him. His retirement account, his monthly expenses, his Social Security estimate. 4 years. He had looked at each of those numbers separately. He had never looked at them together. When he got home, his wife was sitting on the porch. She smiled as he walked up. So, how did it go? John sat down beside her. It was different than I expected. What do you mean? I thought Sarah was going to tell me whether $500,000 was enough. His wife nodded. And did she? John smiled. Not exactly. She showed me that I was asking the wrong question. His wife looked at him. What was the right question? John took a deep breath. Not, how much have I saved? But, will all of my retirement income cover the life we want to live? His wife smiled. That sounds like a much better question. John laughed. I think so too. That's something many people don't realize. A retirement account is only one piece of a retirement plan. The real goal isn't to reach a certain dollar amount. The goal is to create enough income to support the life you want after work. For one family, that might require a much larger retirement account. For another, it could require much less. That's why comparing your retirement savings to someone else's can be one of the biggest mistakes you make. John looked across the neighborhood. I spent years thinking I was chasing retirement. He paused. I was really chasing a number, and I never stopped to ask whether it was the right one. His wife reached over and held his hand. So, do you feel ready now? John smiled. I feel informed. And honestly, that's a lot better than being scared. He wasn't claiming that every question had been answered, or that every retirement plan is the same. He simply understood something he hadn't understood a week earlier. Confidence doesn't come from reading headlines. It comes from understanding your own plan. John's retirement account was still worth exactly the same as it had been a few days ago. $500,000. The number hadn't changed. But the way he looked at it had. This is the difference between fear and planning. Fear asks, what if I don't have enough? Planning asks, what do I actually need? And once John understood that difference, the headline no longer controlled his future. A few weeks later, John logged into his retirement account again. The balance was almost exactly the same, just over $500,000. A month earlier, seeing that number had filled him with doubt. Now, it gave him something different. Perspective. Not because he suddenly had more money, but because he finally understood what that money was meant to do. It wasn't there to win a race, or to match someone else's retirement. It was there to help support the life he and his wife wanted to live. Before meeting Sarah, John believed retirement was about reaching one magic number. Now he knew better. Retirement isn't about reaching someone else's goal. It's about understanding your own. That's why two people with the exact same retirement savings can have completely different retirements. One may have enough. The other may not. The difference isn't always how much they've saved. It's how much they need. John still had decisions to make. When to claim Social Security. How much to withdraw each year. How to prepare for unexpected expenses. Those questions still mattered. But now, he had a plan. And that's what gave him confidence. The headline that once filled him with fear no longer controlled his future. Because headlines are written for millions of people. A retirement plan is written for one. You. If there's one lesson to take away from John's story, it's this. Don't let someone else's retirement number decide your future. Start with your expenses. Understand your income. Build a plan around your life, not someone else's headline. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever wondered how much you really need to retire? Or have you been chasing a number because everyone else said you should? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed John's story and found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe to Finance Panda. Because every week, we turn real retirement questions into simple stories that help you plan with more confidence. I'll see you in the next one.